As part of National Apprenticeship Week, we've teamed up with the mental health charity Mind, Aston Villa legend Lee Hendrie, and our Trade Apprentice 2020 finalist Matt Hill to talk about their own mental health battles. If you or anyone you know needs support with mental health, please visit mind.org.uk for advice.
Hello, I'm Alison from Mind, and I'm delighted to say that I'm joined here today by Lee Hendrie, Aston Villa legend, and by Matt Hill, who is the Screwfix's 2020 Trade Apprentice finalist. And we're going to be talking today about a really important issue. We're talking about mental health, and particularly mental health in young men. So, Matt, if I could just start by asking you, you've been really open about your issues with loneliness and depression, I think, particularly in the past. Can you tell us a bit more about what was happening for you at that time, when it first started and how you were first feeling, maybe?
Yes, so it started from quite a young age when I was in secondary school, probably around 15, 16. And it was quite difficult for me to actually recognise and understand until I was a bit older, fully what was wrong and how best to resolve it. But I noticed I started losing a lot of motivation, a lot of self-care and self-love in myself. And it really did affect and spill onto everything I was doing as a teenager and progressing on into my adulthood.
Okay, so you particularly mentioned self-motivation and lack of self-love. That's really sad. So was there anything particularly going on in your life at the time that you think triggered that?
I mean, it was one of the most complicated things about it is that I never understood like a root cause of it. There was never one particular thing that would stand out to why I might be feeling a certain way about myself or what was going on in my life. It was lots of little minor things that eventually built up into a big thing that I couldn't really shrug off my shoulders anymore. And I noticed in school, for example, I was never very an academic kind of child, so I was always under pressure, I was always falling behind, and I was behind for a lot of my school career. And I felt a lot of social pressure too. I mean, I always bounced around friendship groups and never had a permanent group of friends. So as a teenager, that was a big thing in my life, was the social interaction. So I didn't really have a permanent group of friends or people to talk to. And I think a lot of the hobbies and passions I had and I loved, I tended to isolate myself from a bit more and took the enjoyment out of it. And there's lots of little tiny issues that just built up into a bigger issue that actually ended up dealing with quite severe later on.
Just listening to you there, I mean, did you speak to people when you felt this way? Did you feel that you felt different to others at that sort of time?
I think a very difficult thing for me is that I didn't really recognise it much at a younger age. I just brushed it off like it's school, or it's what school life's like, or whatever. And so reaching out to people was quite hard because I bounced around from people to people, so I never had one face to always talk to and always relate to. And I think in school that was probably the biggest thing that kept me going, was the social implement of it, because I was just failing in school, doing awful in that. And my home life was good. My home life was really good, but whenever I went to school, it was always that big down and draw down. So it was difficult to reach out and speak to people and talk about it because I lacked a bit of a social surrounding.
And was that down to just your confidence in yourself, or did you feel that you couldn't actually think, or you couldn't grasp what was actually going on? Because I felt it more as I got older, but as a younger age, I do look back and I think to the similar sort of situations that similar things you've just spoke about, really. And probably I had a focus, and I had possibly friends that I could probably make me feel a little bit better about myself. And you said about your school, I hated school, you see. So that was one thing that I thought was my problem, that I just didn't want to go to school, which made me leave school quite early. I was quite fortunate at a young age that ended up going to Aston Villa, and they'd let me go to a college-based sort of education, which sort of worked for me. But I think that's what kind of tided my situation over as I got younger. But you know, I listening to you, I think that's what possibly made me sort of just kind of like just get on with things. But if you haven't got a focus, I mean, you talked about, you know, I mean, was you into sport and stuff like that when you was sort of young?
I mean, I was quite into rugby at the time.
Yeah.
So that was a nice thing, a nice kind of social event that I had going on. But I used to do the Army Cadets when I was a young kid, and that was a big portion of my life, and that's where I got most of my actual friends, and I did a lot of social gatherings and events with and stuff. I never really got it from school much, but the thing with school is that I was very much a social bee. Everybody knew me, everybody knew my name, and everybody kind of saw me as a bit more of a happier, funnier chap. So being kind of a social bee, but with no like groundings, with no like kind of people to always be with, and that's what made it most difficult about school, really. But yeah, I did have stuff like cadets and rugby that I used to regularly attend, and I had a lot of passion and motivation for the first couple of years I did them until this, to me was a small issue in school, developed into something a bit bigger and weightier.
Matt, can I just ask you where you very first went for support?
So this was actually, wasn't long ago. It was about a year ago or something when I first properly spoke out about this. And this was actually when, I mean, this school was meant 4 years ago. So this is when I was actually on a building site in my trade, as an apprentice. And I had the stresses of the world on my shoulders, and I just felt so weighted down, and I couldn't even explain what was going on, but I wasn't having a good time. I was hating myself. I wasn't enjoying my trade because of everything going on around me. I kept on messing up all day on this job, getting things wrong, the centimetre out on a kitchen worktop or something, just awful mistakes, and I just broke down. I just burst, like the bottle burst, and I'm very lucky that it was on site, surrounded by people I work with, because if that would have been on my own, I would have struggled deeply with that. But I just burst, and I was bawling my eyes out. I was stressed. I was everything, and it wasn't till my dad, who is my boss, took me in the van. We sat in the van, and we just sat there, and we spoke and we spoke and we spoke, because my dad suffers with PTSD. So we managed to actually relate a lot, and it was kind of that ground feeling that, you know, I've kind of just relaxed, and I've just let everything out, and I must have spoke for about an hour to him in this van, forgetting everything that's going on.
How much weight did you feel lifted off your shoulder just getting that off? I mean, you talked about that big bubble and exploding. I mean, how much better did you feel for just relating and actually getting them problems out of what you felt?
I mean, it was the biggest relief of my life, I could probably say, the biggest stress off my shoulders, because we're talking about years of tiny little things that have built up and have formed this big, heavy weight on my shoulders, and to the point where I wasn't even enjoying what I chose to do with my life. And that was a big thing, not to enjoy what your job is and what you want to do every day. And so when I spoke to him and it finally all had to come out, I felt, I mean, obviously it didn't go away. Nothing goes away like that, but it was a big relief. And with that, and speaking to him, and him speaking to me, and we can actually relate. And I never thought we could relate in a way like that, especially being my father. And it was a big relief, and it kind of motivated me that, you know, this really, really works. This really helps in a way, and that maybe if I can speak a bit more about it, it might help me. And that's what led me on to a lot of the work I've done with mental health surrounding it, and helping others with it. Because to me now, speaking about it and talking about like how I feel and what kind of I've gone through, no matter how, even if I can't understand it with how complicated it is, it's kind of like an antidepressant for me. And that's my way of like dealing with it, is by using my bad negative experiences to kind of create not necessarily a positive one, but one where we can at least feel relaxed and express how we feel and get all that weight off our shoulders done. So, yeah.
Do you know, when I spoke to you, Lee, a few months ago about this very same topic, the one thing that I took lots of really good stuff away from it, but the one thing was, you said the thing that was the turning point for you was talking to somebody, and how you had spent a long time not doing that because you thought it was a weakness to admit it, but how quickly you realised that it was a strength to actually talk about how you were feeling, and which is why you are so keen now to continue to talk about it. Would you say that that's right? Have I interpreted that correctly?
Yeah, and just listening to Matt there, it brings back memories, and it makes me think. And you make me, honestly, I can't even tell you enough. Listening to you and how you've come across is absolutely amazing and brilliant. But you made me feel better. I can't describe it. Just you actually saying that, I just feel like I've got even a bit of the hair standing up on the back of my neck. It just feels we've been in similar situations, whether it's in different categories, and for different reasons, but it really does. I can't state enough that how hard it was for me to actually talk to someone. I think what was possibly harder for me is that I felt that because I was in the public eye, and because people judge me quite quickly, and famous people, if you like, quite quickly, I found it even harder to do that. And I think that was my only hold back, that I didn't want to. I mean, I lied about going to speak to people, to my wife, to my family, because I felt that I was just trying to say to them it was okay, but it wasn't okay. And that day I actually went and spoke to someone was, like I said, it was probably the biggest relief. Yes, it wasn't going to change anything like that, but it was a step forward to where I was going to improve and how I was going to achieve what I wanted to do. And that was to get away from feeling how bad I felt. So, yes, totally right. I mean, it's just great to relate to that.
I think the biggest thing that I always took from that when I started doing that was I learned a lot about how like we can make ourselves feel a bit more comfortable and happy with ourselves. And I think one of the biggest things I learned from it is that antidepressants isn't just like medication. It's what we can do as people to make ourselves feel a bit better. And that's the biggest thing I took from that. And there's so many personal reasons that we can actually help ourselves, but it's all individual. You know what I mean?
Yeah, very true, mate.
It's very so important to take those first steps and recognise it yourself, Matt. That's absolutely brilliant. Can I just ask what one bit of advice, and I asked this to Lee as well, what one bit of advice would you give to others, and particularly, let's say, young men perhaps in the same trade as you are, so not surrounded with their dad, but perhaps with other men that they feel that they can openly talk to? What one bit of advice would you give to young men who may find themselves in a similar position with you, but without their dad immediately on hand to talk to?
Yeah. I think the first thing is the first thing we need to address in the trade is the macho-ness. And I think everybody reckons or feels like there's a big macho-ness in the trade, but I feel like when you actually speak out, you kind of realise that it's not necessarily as difficult as what you might have thought it would be. Everyone's quite worried to look, big and manly, but big and manly comes in all shapes and sizes, and that might include struggling with your mental health. And so, look, speaking out is important. And as a tradesperson, you might have a boss, someone you're attached to, someone you're going to work with closely, or even if you don't work with closely, people you're going to see on a daily basis. Don't be afraid to speak out about it, because I guarantee every person there might have something that's stressed them out, or they could do with just getting off their head, no matter how little it is. So speaking out is important, straight up. Getting what you need to feel off your chest is important. But if you feel like it's affecting you as an apprentice, your workload, the way that you're learning, just speak to your boss about it. Try and figure out something that's beneficial for you. Don't work late. Don't work, late hours. Don't try and take in as much as you can. Be calm, be sensible, and have appropriate planning and organisation for things you do need to do, because it will just help you out a lot better. But definitely, obviously, speak about it. But just try and keep your motivation and your grit, and actually enjoy what you're doing and learning, really.
Do you think this is a bigger issue with younger men, like in what you do in that trade? And do you think that, I mean, do they speak enough? Do you speak to other people that are in a similar sort of situation that you've been in?
I mean, I think when I'm in the trade, I love the atmosphere of the trade. It's very fun. There's a lot of jokes. There's a lot of banter going around, and you can generally have fun whilst you're working. So I think my biggest fear was if I spoke out about it, is that I didn't want to be treated different. I didn't want people not to suddenly start joking with me because they're worried something might offend me or upset me. And I think the problem we face is we deal with such a macho-ness. There's like a macho-ness stereotype, but if you are to speak out about it, there's suddenly a weak stereotype too. And that's not true at all. You can have mental issues, you can be upset, you can suffer with depression. It doesn't change you as a person. It doesn't change, for example, your humour. And that was one of the biggest things I was worried about personally, was that if I came out about my mental health on a site full of lads who all love to joke and take the mick and play pranks, I don't want to be an outcast. I don't want to be treated different. And I think that's a big side that we need to understand too, that just because maybe we might suffer with something doesn't mean that we should necessarily be treated in such a different manner to where we have to be delicate with each other, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and Matt, do you feel that you've, not that you want that respect, but do you feel that people respect you more for actually doing that and actually saying and coming across the way you have done?
Yeah, I mean, ever since I first publicly came out about it with like a video I did, I've had nothing but support really from my colleagues that have all seen it. They've all tapped me on the back, said well done, and after doing that, it's made it feel a bit more like, I don't want to say normal because it's not normal, but a bit easier for me to go about my daily life. Everybody supports me, and I love that no one views me differently, and they are very happy that, especially in the trades, which we don't see much of, that something like that kind of content has come out and been put into the trade community, because it's not something we see much, and I think it's just something we're starting to adapt to now and understand a bit better.
Thank you so much, Matt. That was so good to hear. And that you're not only helping others, but you're helping to break down that stigma and discrimination that you've talked about, which clearly still, exists in some pockets of industry and work and whatever. And the more that we can talk about it, because as you say, we there is a great deal of us out there that have these issues, far more than what you would realise. So I'm just going to wrap up now and say thank you so much. Thank you, Lee, and thank you to Matt for being so honest with us. If anybody wants to find out more, I would encourage you to go to www.mind.org.uk to find out more, or you can go and find out what facilities and services your local Mind can offer. So thank you very much, both of you. Thank you.